What strange idea worked? Because people are weird. Grey Goose vodka wasn't selling well, so they just tripled the price and sales went through the roof. Everybody thought, it's more expensive, it must be better and really fancy. Also, Grey Goose made their bottles so skinny and tall so they would have to be placed on the top shelf. Captain Cook noticed one day at port that sailors debarking from Spanish vessels weren't suffering from scurvy like sailors on British ships were. He couldn't figure it out until one day he noticed the food rations being loaded onto the Spanish ships and saw that sauerkraut were a part of their meal plans while at sea, whereas they were completely absent from British meal plans and diets in general. How do you get someone to eat sauerkraut while at sea if it is not part of their diet? You introduce it into the officers' meals only, of course. And then you have the officers dine next to the rest of the rank and file, where everyone can see the officers eating sauerkraut which they cannot have. From there, you wait for the rest of the sailors to ask why they can't have the new mystery food, and then you agree to compromise and allow all sailors to have sauerkraut once per week, as a reward for a diligent week's work. Houston Airport got a lot of complaints that it took baggage too long to get to the baggage claim and people had to wait a long time. They moved the baggage claim farther away from where you get off the airplane, and even though it took just as long, because people had to walk there, they didn't complain. It's why elevators tend to have shiny surfaces in the waiting areas. If you put a mirror by an elevator, people don't worry as much about wait times because they can look at themselves. That Goat Simulator game took off. Didn't see that one coming. The concept of, if you want to know the correct answer to something, put out a wrong answer instead of asking for the real answer. People are more likely to correct your mistake than answer your question. Yeah, I think it's called Poe's Law. Googling the number 241,543,903 will result in tons of images of people with their heads in freezers. Somebody out there had a dream, and now it's a reality. Googling 4,636,228,756 results in the same, except this time it's washing machines. Making cake mixes require more work, increased sales. Betty Crocker cake mixes weren't selling well when they were first introduced. Women felt that because they weren't doing anything other than adding water that they weren't working hard enough. The company then made it so you had to add eggs as well and they started flying off the shelves. A man decided he was going to try to get to house by making a series of trades that started with him trading one red paperclip. He succeeded in his quest to trade from a paperclip to a house. Looking at the list, there are some really odd trades that make you think, what the frick, why? Howard Stern made a fortune talking to strippers on the radio where you can't see them. Clicker Games. A million pixel web page. That dude is a genius. But people who put ads there, weird. There's a store here in Seattle, on Aurora Avenue called the Purple Store. Everything they sell is purple. It's been there for years. Sales skyrocketed when Prince died. Not even joking. P comments. Comparatively, the share to social media button on P websites. When I first started writing Android apps, I asked myself, what do people really want? Nudes is the obvious answer, but they already have lots of ways to send nudes. I'm not going to do better than any of 100 messaging apps on my own. They want to send nudes, and for there to be no trace of them to later end up on a crappy website. So I started working out an app where you could send pictures, on the basis that they could only be seen by the intended receiver. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized this just isn't a solvable problem. Sure, maybe I could override the screenshot functionality. They could still just take a picture of their phone screen with some other camera. Can't be done, I says to myself. And I forget about it. The next year, Snapchat blew up. Turns out people don't need actual security. Out of sight, out of mind is nothing. But it's enough. That had not occurred to me. Turns out people don't need actual security. They need the appearance of security. The reality is apparently unimportant. When Cadillac downsized and modernized their cars, They were shocked at the fact that the post-purchase survey respondents kept complaining about their car's fuel efficiency. It was bewildering because the new cars got much better gas mileage than the models they replaced. Eventually they figured out what was happening, and it came down to the digital instrument panel. There wasn't anything wrong with the cars. The gauge for the 18-gallon tank would read F until a gallon was used, then read numerically 17, 16, 15, etc. The fix was simple. They programmed the display to read F until the tank got to 16 gallons, skipping over 17, so it read F twice as long. The complaints about lousy gas mileage disappeared. Honey, hey, look, a nest of flying thumbtacks. Bet they're hiding something. This should be the only acceptable way to describe a bee. Selling products by ending the price with $99 instead of clean whole numbers. My mind automatically rounds it now. If it says 14.99 in my head, it's 15. They can't get inside my head. Fundraising money to make potato salad. It took us 3 days to make that potato salad. 3 days. Caesarean section. C-section. I can just see the first time. Trust me guys. I've got this all figured out. I'm going to cut the baby out and everyone's gonna be fine. Unfortunately, there was quite a bit of time between the first person who thought to cut the baby out and the first person who thought, hey, maybe there's a way to cut the baby out and not kill the mother in the process. In a psychology course we were taking, we were tasked with finding a way to improve the listening ability, tested through a multiple choice test after a lecture of little kids. What worked? Blindfolding them and letting them doodle as they listened. The doodles? Meaningless. However, they felt like they had freedom, and the only thing of slight interest was the teacher, so our class scored on average, I think, don't quote me on this, 5% higher than the other group's classes. Definitely works. Keeps the brain active while limiting the stimuli that you're responding to. Kids with ADHD, for example, have been shown to be listening more intently when they are fidgeting. I found while in school that if I doodled on my paper with my ear to the professor, I retained info much better than droning on copying notes. The Fumblerooski play in American football. For people who don't follow the sport, people who aren't American, the Fumblerooski is a play that has been illegal in the NFL for years and was banned in the NCAA in 1992 because it is too effective. For those of you who have seen the popular 90s movie The Little Giants, the annexation of Puerto Rico is a Fumblerooski. Essentially, the play works by having the quarterback intentionally place the ball on the ground. This is technically a fumble by the center's feet after taking the handoff snap, then faking a running play in one direction. While this is happening, a guard, another offensive lineman, picks the ball up and runs in the other direction. As dumb as it sounds, the play works because it's almost impossible to read a Fumblerooski as it's happening. Obstructed vision of what the quarterback does combined with quick timing of the intentional fumble means that you can't really see that he's done it. A defense would pretty much need to know it's coming to stop it. By the time the defense realizes what's happened, the ball can get pretty far downfield. Depending on how close to the end zone they were, it often results in a touchdown. Febreze. Hear me out, because the story is kind of interesting. When P&G first marketed tested Febreze, they couldn't get people to get excited about it. They did some in-home testing, where they gave homeowners, and especially pet owners, a case of Febreze. After a month or two with the product, some P&G reps visited these homeowners. In one such instance, they visited a woman who had 7 or 8 cats, and the whole house just smelled like cat pee. They sat down, trying not to pinch their noses, and asked the woman if she was using the product at all, and what she thought of it. She said, "Well, I started to use 1 bottle, but I found I really didn't need it." Stunned, the reps asked, "Have you ever thought to use it to manage the smell of, your cats?" The woman, completely earnestly, replied, "I tell you, it's the strangest thing. My cats don't smell." So they realized the problem. People don't notice smells in their own homes. So, that's an example of the product not working because people are weird. Here's how P&G made it work. Not to be defeated by silly consumers claiming they didn't need their product, P&G conducted further research. What they found was that people were much more likely to use Febreze if it was part of a routine. so they marketed it as part of a cleaning process. February is after vacuuming. February is after making the bed, etc. Needless to say, it worked. And while people today will use Febreze as the primary method of cleaning their home, P&G had to exploit a human weirdness in order to get people to buy it in the first place. People in other countries are often more willing to be nicer to foreigners than to their own kind. Traveling around a small city in China last year, my friends and I were looking for a hotel willing to hold on to our luggage for us while we did some sightseeing around the city for the day. This can be hit or miss in China. Some hotels are willing to do it, some aren't. Except that day, we got turned down by about 3 or 4 hotels before we started to worry that we wouldn't be able to do much sightseeing. Being fluent in Mandarin, we suddenly thought, what if we decided to do a psychological experiment and play the role of helpless foreigner and see if things went differently? Sure enough, the next hotel we visited, walked right up to the front desk, and as soon as we started speaking English, the receptionist looked at her co-workers. I don't know what they are saying. My English is so bad. To my surprise, they pulled out a phone, called up their off-duty manager, and handed the phone to me. She spoke English, and so I explained to her what we wanted. She immediately said yes. Of course we can hold on to your luggage for you. Enjoy your time sightseeing. This experience alone speaks volumes, but I've seen plenty of other stuff in my travels to suggest that locals can be downright nasty to their own countrymen sometimes. And those same people often are willing to pull out all the stops to accommodate foreign visitors. I have no idea why this is. Probably due to the perceived helplessness of being a foreigner somewhere else leads to the locals being empathetic to your situation. If you are seen as a local or whatever, then most people will say you should have been responsible and had a plan beforehand. Wikipedia. It took a long time to become a high quality source, but the desire of people to correct misinformation is so strong that once there was a high volume of information, the quality gradually surpassed that of traditional encyclopedias. It's amazing that it worked. I remember writing most of the article on Jackalope and a good chunk of the one on mosh pits back in 2003 when they were both stubs. Giving your credit card info and address to a website online in hopes they send a product to your house in a short period of time. I still remember as a kid convincing my mom to let me use her card to make the family's first online purchase, a pinball game. She was so resistant and paranoid to put her info out there, and dad was actually mad after and was convinced we'd been scammed for a week until the game actually came. Cooking shows. It makes sense now, but when they launched, they were lambasted by everyone, because in the pre-DVR era, who would be able to follow along in real time? Of course, the whole thing makes sense now because it's more of an educational approach than an interactive one, but at the same time, it also feels like a great tease to the audience. So, you want me to pay for a show where we film you cooking food the person doesn't eat, and you talk to them via the camera how tasty it is, and you don't pause to have them follow along, and you speed up the cook and prep time so a 3-hour recipe looks like it takes 22 minutes. That sounds like a strip club for food, without the benefit of touch or smell. Injecting yourself with a dead virus to protect yourself from live versions of that same virus. I know to most of us this process and how it works makes sense, but imagine how weird it must have been a long time ago. Body, I have found a dead enemy. Reverse engineer it to kill living enemy. Twitch plays Pokemon. Taking Bikini Bottom and pushing it somewhere else. The Snuggie, it's just putting a bathrobe on backwards. Not a fan of it, but apparently it's great for people that have to use wheelchairs. It doesn't slip like a blanket, covers a lot of the body easily while still allowing use of hands, doesn't have the discomfort of a thick collar or backwards sleeves that just wearing a robe backwards has, and is easier to remove for users and caregivers than coats or robes worn frontwards. How ya doing? Everyone still asks it even though the answer is always a rote good. Mix it by responding frisky, real frisky. Look, you take the stuff that comes out of the gland near this beaver's butt, then, you add it to food and it tastes just like vanilla. Don't ask how I found out, just do it. Requesting things based on your username. You have been visited by the romantic doggo. Comment love is magic so you never fall in the friend zone. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day you magnificent people.